Viewer discretion is strongly advised before we begin. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's not gossip. It's the official courtroom testimony, word for word, from the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. In a development that stunned even seasoned courtroom observers, Wendy Williams. Yes, that Wendy Williams, the queen of hot topics, the voice the industry tried for decades to silence, took the witness stand. And she didn't come quietly. After years of whispered rumors, unanswered questions, and being blackballed by the very industry she helped define, Wendy arrived armed with names, dates, receipts, and a mission. Her testimony wasn't just a takedown of Diddy. It was an indictment of an entire system. The enablers, the silencing tactics, the unchecked power in hip-hop and entertainment. She spoke names from Jay-Z to R. Kelly, and shed light on hidden truths long buried under NDAs, corporate deals, and smear campaigns. This wasn't a tabloid soundbite. This was sworn federal testimony, a moment that felt less like a court hearing and more like a reckoning. When Wendy walked into that courtroom, it wasn't about celebrity. It felt like watching someone who had clawed their way back from being buried, ignored, mocked, erased, just for the chance to finally speak her truth. She wasn't there for applause. She wasn't chasing headlines. She was standing firm because the same voices who once laughed at her, dismissed her, and threatened her were now facing federal scrutiny. She adjusted her mic calmly, stared directly at the jury, and said words that echoed across the courtroom. I was never messy. I was never bitter. I was never lying. I was early. With that, Wendy made it crystal clear. Her mission wasn't revenge. It was exposure. She came prepared, with a thick stack of documents, printouts of old radio show transcripts, internal emails from executives, and a comprehensive timeline of the threats and intimidation she endured. Her testimony began in the early 2000s. He was protected, she said plainly. Everyone in the industry knew it. Mentioning Diddy meant you'd get a phone call within the hour. She recalled how station managers cautioned her, how advertisers yanked support, and how anonymous threats began to feel dangerously personal. You're doing too much, Wendy. You're going to get hurt, Wendy. Then, the bombshell, when he claimed she was literally chased from a radio station by the girl group Total, allegedly sent by Diddy in retaliation. I said they were broke, she recalled, and hours later, they were waiting outside my building. That's not coincidence. That's coordination. To Wendy, her career became a battlefield. Each time she dared to speak the truth about Diddy's behavior, from his private parties to his treatment of artists, something in her life fell apart. A deal collapsed. A contract vanished. A network pulled back. But through it all, she didn't fold. You can blackball me. You can threaten me. But you cannot erase me, she declared. And now I'm under oath. So I hope they're listening, because I'm not stopping until the truth is louder than their machine. Then, prosecutors shifted the focus. They asked about the culture surrounding Diddy. Wendy didn't hesitate. She pivoted, her voice sharpened, toward another figure she had warned the public about long ago. Jay-Z. You can't talk about what Diddy did without also mentioning the powerful figures who stood beside him, smiling, nodding, and staying silent while the abuse unfolded. And yes, that includes Jay-Z. Wendy Williams, poised and unshaken, let her eyes scan the jury box before leaning forward. Y'all remember Foxy Brown? She asked. She was 15. Jay-Z was 27, and he was everywhere with her. When he didn't just make claims. She came with receipts. She held up the debut album Foxy released as a teen, pointing to lyrics reportedly penned by Jay-Z himself. Ain't no an asterisk asterisk like the one I got. No one can F asterisk 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 me better. Asterisk asterisk, she read aloud, deliberate, sharp, unapologetic. The courtroom stiffened. Then, without breaking her gaze, she asked, You tell me, why was a grown man writing these lyrics for a child? From there, Wendy detailed behind-the-scenes accounts only an industry insider would know. Rumors of Jay-Z picking Foxy up directly from high school, showering her with luxury gifts, paying for hair appointments, and orchestrating shopping sprees. This wasn't a record deal, she said, her tone dropping. It was grooming. And then came the next bombshell. For years, whispers circulated about a tape, an alleged video featuring Jay-Z, Foxy Brown, and Jamie Foxx. But before it could surface, Foxy's home was mysteriously burglarized. The rumored tape? Gone. Wendy let the courtroom sit in the tension. Coincidence? I think not. She revealed that shortly after raising these questions on air, she was fired from her top-rated radio show. They call me toxic, she said, but now you're seeing that everything I asked was worth asking. When the prosecution asked if she had tangible evidence to support her claims, Wendy nodded. I have emails, call logs, and contact with producers who backed out of my show the moment I brought up Jay-Z's name. She testified that Jay-Z's team had made quiet but deliberate calls to industry insiders, instructing them to blacklist anyone who even hinted at his connection to Foxy. They didn't just try to shut me up. They turned me into the villain, she said. Not because I was messy, but because I was right, and they couldn't let that truth spread. Then came the darkest part. The part when he claimed no one wanted to believe. The part that had her labeled a liar, a troublemaker, a sensationalist. She told the court, I was the first to say it. Those weren't parties, they were operations. Wendy was referring to the infamous freak-offs, now a central focus in the federal indictment against Diddy. She said she first heard whispers of them back in the late 90s during the peak of Bad Boy Records. Guests had their phones confiscated at the door. NDAs were signed on the spot. Candle escorts guided attendees through the house. Cameras were stationed. Rooms were assigned. This wasn't a party, Wendy said. It was a ritual. She cited an on-air interview with Karen Superhead Steffens, who told Wendy that Diddy had once invited her to one of these gatherings and requested male involvement. Superhead didn't lie, Wendy stated. She described everything. Diddy's paranoia, his drug use, the strange setups. He was terrified she'd expose him. And I made sure people heard that interview, Wendy added. I played it again and again, because the truth was too heavy to let it slide by. She said she'd spoken personally to 3 individuals who attended these events and later required 4 bags to recover, accounts that echoed recent federal charges. They said medical assistants were on standby, Wendy told the jury. This wasn't socializing. This was organized depravity. She handed over a list, pseudonyms only, of those who had privately shared their experiences with her. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Every detail, every name, every pattern matched what Cassie Ventura, Gondil, and others had testified to. Then, when he dropped her final blow, "The baby oil," she said quietly, letting the words sink in like a chilling echo. "I said it on air as a joke," Wendy Williams began, her voice steady. "But it turns out, it wasn't funny at all." She paused. "They really found over 1,000 bottles, just like I said." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. "You want to know how I knew?" she continued, settling into her chair, her gaze locking briefly with Diddy's. "Because people told me, and I was the only one willing to say it out loud." Her tone was calm, almost reflective. She leaned back slightly, then looked directly at him. "All these years later, and now we're finally here. It's not gossip anymore. It's evidence." The atmosphere in the courtroom thickened as Wendy shifted gears. She turned the spotlight towards someone else, a name she had fought to defend for years, Cassie Ventura. "I said it back then," she stated firmly, her eyes fixed on the jury. "While the rest of y'all were mesmerized by the diamonds, the music videos, the red carpets, I saw something else. I saw a scare girl. I saw imbalance." Wendy said she tried to warn the public as early as 2008, when the world was still infatuated with the glitz. She was 19. He was almost 40, she reminded the court. "That's not love. That's leverage." She described how Diddy's lifestyle, his jets, his private security, his industry pull, wasn't just glamorous. It was a prison. She didn't need a boyfriend, Wendy said flatly. She needed a bodyguard. She recalled a clip she once aired on her show, an interview where Cassie flinched the moment Diddy raised his voice. "People said she was nervous," Wendy recounted. "I said it was trauma. Nobody listened." The prosecution then introduced a timeline of Wendy's radio broadcasts that mirrored the allegations Cassie later made in her lawsuit. "I was told he had access to her phones, that he'd pop up at her hotel rooms, that he got hotel staff to unlock her doors," Wendy testified. She paused, taking a breath. And when I said that on air, my sponsors bailed. Then she brought up the 2018 incident, when Cassie allegedly ended the relationship after Diddy forced his way into her home. That wasn't the first time he showed up uninvited, Wendy said. People don't understand. When a mogul wants control, they don't ask. They rearrange the world around them. She explained the dark mechanics behind the power, grooming, isolation, and a weaponized illusion of luxury. He didn't just love Cassie. He owned her, she said. And when she broke the chain, she became a threat. Her voice slowed as she delivered the final blow of that chapter. Everything in that lawsuit, I saw the signs. I said it on the air. And now she's finally being heard. But look what it took. Adjusting her microphone again, Wendy's tone grew more solemn. You don't get to talk about men like Diddy and walk away untouched, she said. I knew that, but I didn't know just how deep the consequences would go. She recounted how in 2004, at the height of her career, she received a chilling message from a major record label executive. Stop talking about Puff, or else. She didn't stop, but the retaliation was swift. The next week, I was yanked from my time slot, she said. They didn't even bother to hide the reason. Wendy testified that she'd learned from multiple sources that Diddy had made strategic phone calls to label heads, promoters, and radio networks, deliberately orchestrating her professional exile. One program director told me straight up, she said, you went too far. You poked the wrong bear. Then came the incident outside her own studio. She had called the girl group total, washed up, and broke on air. Hours later, they were outside, waiting. And you think that was random? Winnie asked. No, they didn't just show up. They were sent. She ended the moment with a chilling recollection, one that left the courtroom breathless. Fans were pressed against the glass of the radio station lobby. Her boyfriend at the time waited outside in the car. Her in turn was panicking. That wasn't just a confrontation, Wendy Williams said, staring straight ahead. That was a message. We can get to you. She recalled the fallout that followed, being disinvited from BET events, denied media passes, and losing lucrative advertising deals. It was all coordinated, she said firmly. Diddy didn't just want to stop me. He wanted to erase me. To prove it, when he pulled out a stack of printed emails from PR firms representing Bad Boy Records at the time. Every message shared the same tone, distance. One line stood out. Per client instruction, we will no longer be booking talent on Wendy Williams' show. When he held up the email for the court to see. That client, she said, Sean Combs. I wasn't the first to be blackballed, she added, but I was one of the few who stayed loud about it. She turned to the jury once more. That's how he operates. If you speak, you lose your mic, your money, your name. But I didn't fold. I talked through the silence. And here I am. Wendy paused, then reflected on a moment from her past that now felt strangely surreal. We come from a very homosexual era of hip-hop, she quoted herself from years back. That wasn't shade, it was truth. And for saying it, I was burned at the stake. She explained how, in the early 2000s, an unspoken rule existed. Protect the powerful, silence the questioners. I had Charlemagne on air with me back then. We both knew what not to say if we wanted to keep our jobs. But I said it anyway. She pointed to her 2004 book, The Wendy Williams Experience, filled with coded messages and veiled warnings about Diddy, Jay-Z, and their after-dark circles. People called it gossip, she said. Now the government calls it evidence. Wendy recalled a 2009 interview with Mark Curry, a former Bad Boy artist who had just released Dancing with the Devil. He called Diddy the shadow that ruins people. I agreed. Then suddenly, that interview vanished from the station's archives. She explained that whenever she tried to feature guests critical of the industry, Superhead, Gene Deal, Jaguar Wright, she was met with resistance. Blocked interviews, threatening emails, even FCC complaints. They came at me from every angle they could. Then she dropped something that visibly caught the court's attention. There was a list, she said. Not one you'll ever see in writing. But everyone in the industry knew it. A list of names you couldn't speak on. And when I broke that rule, I paid the price. She explained that her hot topic segments were frequently flagged, that her producers were warned by talent reps, and executives pulled her aside to caution her. They told me, "You're going to ruin this," for the station, for yourself. She paused again. But now it's all ruined anyway. Because the truth is finally out. Wendy's voice dropped, slower and more grounded. This trial, it's not the beginning, she said. It's the end of a cover-up. And I want the jury to know I've been sounding this alarm for 20 years. You're just now hearing it. She looked across the courtroom, and her tone sharpened. You think this is just about Diddy? You're wrong. This is about the ecosystem that protected him. She let that word hang in the air, and that includes names you were never supposed to hear in a courtroom. She paused, then said them clearly. Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey. A heavy stillness swept the room. The prosecution asked her to elaborate. When he did, calm, direct, brutal. There's a list in Hollywood, she said. Not one you'll ever hold in your hand. But it's real. It's the list of people you don't cross. And if you do, you disappear. Wendy recalled the aftermath of those now infamous radio segments, not only for exposing Diddy's freak-offs and power games, but for daring to call out Tyler Perry, who she claimed had blackballed her behind closed doors. I had sources, real ones. Producers, agents, people deep in the industry, Wendy Williams said, steady and composed. They told me flat out, Wendy, your name's being passed around. They don't want you touching certain topics. You're being labeled unstable. She paused, letting the weight of her words land. This wasn't paranoia. It was a warning. Wendy explained that everything began to unravel after her fallout with the Precious Team, a film project both Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey were deeply involved in. I went from getting invites to red carpet premieres to being erased from the guest list, she recalled. One executive was brutally honest with her. Oprah's people don't want you near her anymore, they said. That's power, Wendy added, and that power was used not to protect the truth, but to protect people like Diddy. Then came a story that chilled the courtroom. Wendy testified that, in a private moment, she had once confided in Oprah about her own history with abuse. She told me she respected me, Wendy said. Told me she'd never exploit that story. But then, just weeks later, her abuser appeared on Oprah's show. He was being given airtime, while Wendy was being blackballed. That wasn't just betrayal, she said softly. That was retaliation. The jury sat stunned as Wendy laid it bare. They smiled with him, she said. They took photos. They stood by Diddy while the rest of us were being destroyed for speaking the truth. And I know why, she added. Because they needed him. For business deals, for access, for silence. Then Wendy revealed an email that had accidentally been forwarded to her from a PR firm representing both Perry's studio and a bad boy-affiliated brand. The subject line was simple but damning. Managing optics, Wendy, Puff, Tyler. That's all it said, she told the court, but that's all I needed to see. She stared straight ahead. These aren't just isolated stars. They're part of a machine, one that feeds on silence and crushes anyone who dares to pull back the curtain. The tension in the courtroom was now undeniable. Then came what prosecutors would later call a turning point in the trial, when he pulled out a thick folder and tapped the cover. This, she said, is a collection of NDA email threads and internal memos that were never supposed to be seen. She clarified that the documents weren't obtained through hacking, but handed to her by former industry insiders who had long since left the game. They were tired, Wendy explained. Tired of watching women disappear. Tired of seeing truth dismissed as gossip. She began reading from a 2007 NDA with names redacted. The language was chilling. Subject agrees not to disclose any private gatherings, recordings, or interactions with Sean Combs, his guests, or associates. Violation may result in financial penalties and public retaliation. She slammed the paper down. Public retaliation, she repeated. That's how deep this went. Next, she read from an internal hotel chain email, dated 2015, when Cassie was still with Diddy. We have prepared the presidential suite with all requested amenities, including extra linens, candlelit lighting, and discretion measures. Mr. Combs' assistant will arrive for setup before guest entry. You think this was just celebrity partying? She asked. No, this was a system, planned, funded, scheduled, and cleaned up afterward. She then presented evidence of payments made to publicists, talent managers, and bloggers, all meant to control the narrative. One email directed a writer to avoid rumors and instead publish a story praising Diddy's philanthropic efforts. Finally, Wendy described a photo entered into evidence. Diddy, Tyler Perry, and a media consultant known for crisis control, smiling at a 2019 gala. They were smiling, Wendy said, while women were being paid to stay silent, and others were being destroyed for refusing to. She looked directly at the jury. They offered me an NDA too, she said. I didn't take it. They wanted to silence me, Wendy said. They told me I could have a syndicated TV deal if I agreed to stop talking about the topics I was covering. She paused, her tone steady. I said no, and I paid the price. The courtroom sat in total silence. The silence they bought, she continued, cost other people their freedom, their peace, their truth. And now it's all unraveling, one NDA at a time. As Wendy Williams approached the end of her testimony, she didn't break down. She didn't shed a tear. She simply sat still, carrying the weight of 20 years of trying to warn the world and being ignored. You see Diddy on trial, she said, voice calm and unwavering. But I see something much bigger. This isn't just about what he did. It's about who let him do it. She gestured toward the defense table. You see one man, but behind him stands a legacy of silence, a tower built on fear, NDAs, power plays, party invitations, and billion-dollar handshakes. Then she turned to face the jury. And every time someone tried to speak, that tower crushed them. She reminded the court that while Diddy was the one officially on trial, others, Jay-Z, Tyler Perry, Oprah, record labels, handlers, had all remained silent for years. Some of them saw it firsthand. They shook his hand. They cashed his checks. And they made sure anyone who asked questions disappeared. Wendy closed with the same voice that made her radio career legendary. Bold, raw, unapologetic. They call me bitter. They call me crazy. But I was right. And I'd rather be right in hell than silent in heaven. Then, looking directly at Diddy, you thought I was finished. You thought your power would protect you. But now, here you are, where the truth finally caught up. And I hope it's loud. Before leaving the stand, she turned to the gallery. This trial isn't the end. It's the beginning of people naming names, of walls cracking, and of the whole tower coming down. And with that, when he walked out,